I grew up in a Missionary Baptist church that people likened more to a cult than an actual Baptist church. And I cannot allow the things that are harmful to be excused because I have a couple of good memories.
I was raised Pentecostal. And if you didn't speak in tongues, you weren't really saved, or you hadn't had the full baptism of the Holy Spirit. I felt like I was physically and emotionally dying in this place.
I was a devout Jehovah's Witness. I can honestly say I do think that religion played a paternal role in my life.
My faith left me, and I think a lot of us who are Pentecostal, very, very judgmental. And I remember being raped on Saturday night and showing up to service on Sunday where this man was preaching.
Purity culture makes us
Ashamed.
Perfect targets for sexual assault and rape.
So why are Black women, you guys, so attracted to the church? What do you guys want Black women in particular to know who are questioning, who are on the fence, who are struggling in this area of their lives? Hey everyone, welcome to the Coffee No Cream podcast. My name is Erin Braxton and I'm the host of Coffee No Cream. Here on Coffee No Cream, we are unapologetically dedicated to Black women, and we share what I like to call Coffee No Cream moments, those things that happen to us Black women in business and in life just because we are Black women. Today, I have a panel of three amazing women. We have Abby the attorney returning, we have Tammy Triolo returning, and we have the Unpunishable Woman, Ashanti, returning. We're talking about religion. And this has been a topic that I have wanted to discuss on the podcast for a while now. This is not going to be our first conversation about religion. These three women have walked away from religion, and we're going to talk about why. We're going to talk about their backgrounds. We're going to talk about the trauma that they experienced while in their different religions, because all three come from different religious backgrounds. And we're going to talk about why Black women are so supportive of the church and religion. And, you know, I encourage you to come to the conversation with an open mind. I encourage you to watch and listen with the intention of understanding. Now, I get that a lot of my viewers are still very much a part of the church, but after my interview with Unpunishable Woman a couple weeks ago, I realized how many are not. I realized in the conversations that I'm having just in my personal life and online, how many Black women are struggling in this area. So I wanted to start off this conversation with this panel of women. I think it's a good one, whether you agree or disagree. It's somewhere where you could at least get an understanding of the way some Black women are feeling about religion right now in 2026. So before we get into it, I want to ask that you guys please like, please share, please subscribe. I hear there's a way you can send DMs as well on YouTube, but I'm not quite sure. If you can figure it out and you want to message me, feel free. You can always go to coffeenocream.com and contact me directly. If you have any questions or something you want to discuss, or you can always email me. I'll put that link below. And I think that's it. So let's just get right into the episode. I'll see you there. So welcome, ladies. How are you today? I'm so excited. I just want to start by letting each of you take us through how you grew up in religion. What religion was for you growing up. And I'm going to start with Abby, the attorney. And tell us what religion was like for you growing up.
I grew up in a Missionary Baptist church that people likened more to a cult than an actual Baptist church. We had a separate decorum that you were supposed to follow. It was written out and given to every member. And if you violated any part of the decorum, you had to come to conference, which was every third Wednesday. And if you had a significant violation, they would take away what was called your right hand of fellowship. And you would have to do some things to get your right hand of fellowship back. I had difficulties in this church the entire time that I was in it. I had several times that I got into trouble when I was a teenager and had to be called in to speak to all the deacons. I was forced to apologize on several occasions. I actually paid attention to the sermons, and I would point out when things were contradictory or didn't make sense, either internally or against the Bible, and they did not like that. And I was always on my way out. I just didn't effectuate it fast enough, and then they finally kicked me out when I was around 22, 23. They came to my house, to my mom's house, before they kicked me out to have like a conversation. I have no recollection of this conversation, but my sister says that I was belligerent through the entire thing, and she found it hilarious. My mom was embarrassed, but I remember seeing the van pull up with the church name beside it, and I remember nothing after it. After that, I thought that my issue was that particular church. And so I did try going to different churches, and I did get like very involved with the last church that I went to. I was extremely involved. I participated with the teens, putting together college fairs. I went to, that church had different Bible studies that you could attend, like that had different titles. I would circle through the different, educational options listed, but I would call myself an atheist today. I teetered along the agnostic atheist border for a long time, but I would call myself atheist today because there are things that I simply cannot reconcile. And I thought that I could just allow it to exist. It can exist in my life, and it can be a part of my memories. It can be a part of my music. It can be a part of my culture. I don't have to reject everything until it was necessary, because I have a transgender child, and I cannot allow the things that are harmful to be excused because I have a couple of good memories.
All right, we're going to come back to that. Tammy.
So I was raised Pentecostal. Pentecostal is a little bit more, I feel, more fervent than Baptist. In fact, we used to say that the Baptists weren't really saved, that the Pentecostals were. And so I grew up in a fire and brimstone kind of church. You had to be baptized with the Holy Ghost with evidence of speaking in tongues. And if you didn't speak in tongues, you weren't really saved, or you hadn't had the full baptism of the Holy Spirit. And so I was raised Pentecostal in the Caribbean. And I think Pentecostals in the Caribbean is like Pentecostals here on steroids. I grew up with a mother that didn't wear pants. She was not allowed to wear pants. She didn't wear jewelry, never wore makeup. I think the only thing my mother allowed herself to do was to perm her hair. And that was almost a scandal when she permed her hair. So we grew up we dressed modestly. And at that young age, you get what your parents give you. You don't have real thoughts. And I think when I was young, I went to church because we had to go to church. I don't think I was ever really paying attention to church at a very young age. And then I moved to America. I moved in with a cousin who nobody knew was gay. And she came out to me, well, she was forced out of the closet because she started dating a woman, and it was this woman's first experience in a lesbian relationship. And so she told me my cousin was gay. And I remember my cousin being afraid that my mom would pull me from her house because my mom was so devoutly Christian. But my mom didn't do that. And all through like being raised Christian, even with my mother, there was some things that were like contradictory. Like my mother, we were taught homosexuality is gay. Transgender would just blow their minds, really. But we were taught that these people were gay and they were going to hell and they needed to repent and all these things. But yet the neighborhood gay person was always at our house, drinking tea with my mom, gossiping, right? Like, it's like the thing that a lot of Christian women do. They like to have like pocket gays that they hang out with, they do things with, But behind, when it's done, they still believe these people are going to hell, which is such a weird way of thinking. And so I was away from church for a little bit. From I was 14 till 18. And I don't know what happened at 18 years old. Like Abby said, when she left, at 18 years old, I got back into the church and became fervent. Not homophobic or anything like that, because I was still trying to reconcile homosexuality with this faith, right? But I could compartmentalize that and deal with that later. But I was very fervent in church, and I was a devout Christian for probably 8 years. And I just remember one time sitting in church and thinking, I'm dying in this place. I felt like I was physically and emotionally dying in this place. And none of the messages were hitting anymore. It didn't make me hoop and holler. It didn't make me shout. I didn't feel inspired. I was like, something's off here. It was almost like my body and my spirit knew before my physical body left the building. And I was sitting in church at the time with my husband, and I said out loud, music was playing so nobody heard me, but I'm like, I'm dying in this place. And I swear on everything, I heard like somebody say, and I thought it was my husband, but I heard somebody say, then leave. So I looked up at my husband and I said, what did you say? And he goes, I didn't say anything. I said, you didn't say then leave? He goes, no. And I sat in the rest of that service and I never went back.
Okay, Ashanti, I know a little of your story, but we didn't go back to the very beginning when you were on. So tell us how you grew up.
Yeah, I was a devout Jehovah's Witness. I grew up in the religion. I was about 32 when I ended up leaving. It was never, ever an option to leave in my mind. I was devout. I never imagined a life outside of the religion. My immediate family, as in mother, sister, aunt, are in the religion. I didn't have friends outside of the religion, really. So my entire life, my identity, my faith, I genuinely believed it was the one true religion because that's what you're taught. In fact, internally, they refer to it as the truth. So my upbringing was very much that this religion is based on scripture. Everything we do, everything we believe is based in scripture. And for me, I can honestly say I do think that religion played a paternal role in my life because I grew up with my mother. And actually, I can reflect back and think that the structure, the legalist aspect of the religion played a father role. And that also deepened my attachment because I enjoyed the structure. I enjoyed the rigor. And in a weird way, yes, you are surveilled and you're taught to surveil each other and yourself. But I think that played a very fatherly role in my life, actually, which deepened my attachment to the religion, which is why when I ended up leaving, it was so traumatic, so painful. It felt like an identity crisis because it had played this fatherly role in my life and in many ways, probably like a second heartbreak, right? I thought I was well over the fact that my own biological father was absent, right? But actually, I think leaving the religion, it was deeper because that was the replacement father role for me in terms of its function. Yeah.
Abby, you said when you did something wrong, the right hand, can you explain what that was?
Yeah, so for example, many young ladies, if they got pregnant out of wedlock, they would have to come before the church and you'd have your right hand of fellowship taken away from you. And you could only come back to the church after the sin was over. And then you could apologize for the sin and you could kind of be accepted back. You were not fully accepted back because they would still punish you in other ways. So for example, one young lady that I was very close to, and I still take this personally, to be quite honest. She married the person that she got pregnant by, and they forced her to get married in the gym behind the church. She wasn't even allowed to have a wedding in the church, even though she'd gone through their whole process of getting her right hand of fellowship back. When she rejoined the choir, they made her sing God of a Second Chance. And she couldn't sing any of the songs that she used to lead. And so they continued punishing her. And I still take that kind of personally, because one of the last conversations that we had, because now, anyway, that's a different subject. But one of the last conversations that we had, she had expressed discomfort in her marriage because her husband still wanted to be active a lot. I don't know on this platform how much you can say, so I hope you guys understand. And she was quite uncomfortable with it because of the way that we grew up. She was not comfortable with being able to even do that with her now spouse, because of that church trauma and because the way that she had been treated. And she has done everything to try and redeem herself and, reconcile for that in her mind that she could, but yet they continue to punish her. And I blame them. I don't blame her for staying. I blame them. And I don't even remember what the question was. I'm so sorry.
I was the right hand of fellowship.
Okay. Yeah, so that's what it is. And it could be something very minor too. Like my sister also was kicked out of the church, and hers was because she was driving with a suspended license. In Georgia, they don't tell you when they suspend your license. But anyway, and her name was in the newspaper. And so because her name was in the newspaper for being arrested, they were forcing her to come before the church to repent. She refused to do it. Her right hand of fellowship was taken away.
Tammy, I saw your face when you...
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm having a thought here, right? Because I grew up Pentecostal, and in the Pentecostal faith, there is no, like, you don't get punished. You don't have to come before the church and repent. And with Jehovah's Witnesses, the surveillance and all of the punishments, like that doesn't happen in the Pentecostal church. You could backslide and come back and backslide and come back, and nobody's looking at you like you did something wrong. There's no apologies needed. Everybody's just happy that you found your way back to Christ. And I'm listening to both of these young women's account of how their religion punishes. And I was thinking, okay, well, maybe my religion wasn't so bad, but the way that Pentecostals, the jail for us happens here. So there's no punishment that we have to go through. There's no repentance that we have to do in front of the church. None of that. So if you got pregnant out of wedlock, it was a shame to your parents, but you could come back to church and everything was forgiven. Nobody treated you any differently. None of that happened. But the way that we imprisoned ourselves was how we thought about the world around us. And when Abby was saying that her friend is having an issue with being intimate, I think a lot of Pentecostal women struggle with this too, because you're told to be chaste. You're told to hold yourself until marriage. You're told not to do any of these things. And then they expect you to get married and turn into a slut. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. And so our punishment wasn't in the way that you had to, like, your right hand of fellowship would be taken away, but the way that we thought about ourselves, the way that we surveilled ourselves. We didn't need the church to do it because the doctrine made you do it. And my faith left me, and I think a lot of us who are Pentecostal, very, very judgmental. We were happy to send people to, listen, we sent you to hell right out of the gate. Even if the pastor didn't do that, I would be looking at Abby and I'd be like, okay, well, she's going to hell. Fix that. Like one of those things. So for us, it wasn't like this physical punishment or humiliation in the church, but the way that we're indoctrinated, we are so judgmental and we create our own cages for ourselves. So you don't need the pastor or the deacon or anybody surveilling you because you've been indoctrinated so deeply, you will surveil yourself.
Was that the case, Ashanti? I was going to ask you because you're nodding.
Yeah, it's a mixture of both. Jehovah's Witnesses are very good at both. So it works on that double layer. So there's that punishment that comes through the elders in the congregation, very similar to you, Abby. So you can be marked, for example. Other people will be made aware that you're bad association. Depending on what you've done, it will be announced from the platform. So people will come to know that you have received either a private reproval, as they call it, or a public reproval, or you've been disfellowshipped. The disfellowshipped one is when nobody can talk to you. So it's the equivalent to excommunication. And then you have what you described, Tammy, which is the social surveillance. So somebody could see you talking to a man or sitting in the car with a man, and they will go and tell the elders. The elders will come and ask you, what were you doing in that car? They rely on the scripture that talks about if you see a man about to make a false step. So what that means is if I see you, I need to come up to you and say, you've got 24 hours to go to the elders and tell them what you've done. If you don't, I will go. So that's how the system really
Wow.
works when it comes to the
Wow.
different layers of surveillance and then punishment. But what they call it is discipline and counsel.
Mm.
Uh, but it's the same, very much the same kind of result. And if you do get disfellowshipped or publicly reproved, that stain can stay with you for quite some time, actually. Even if you are reinstated and your privileges are restored, people will know that you were disfellowshipped, and that can stay with you for years.
Wow.
So, Tammy, when I spoke to you before, and, we were leading up to this, you said a lot of people who leave the church are called out. Can you talk about that?
I think those of us who actually make our way out of the church, whether we know it or not, we're called out of the church because much like Ashanti, much like Abby, you couldn't like no, like how we get on TikTok now, you see deconstructing TikToks and there's so much. I would have never clicked on any of those videos. I wouldn't have watched them, right? Because again, that's self surveillance. You're letting evil in, you're letting the devil in, all these things. And so I feel like the people who make their way out of the church, whether they know it or not, I feel like universe, source, God, whatever you believe in, calls you out. And no amount of facts you can give us, no amount of, biblical history you can share, we wouldn't believe any of that. Because for me, religion is deeply emotional. It's an emotional attachment to a thing more than it is your brain. Now, because Abby is a lawyer, and I think just the way that she thinks and the way that she weighs things,
Yeah.
she probably had a different experience coming out. But those of us who are emotionally tied to this religion, Christianity, in whatever form or font you do it in, it's such an emotional attachment that you feel like you can't let the devil in. So you can't let doubt come in. You can't let naysayers come in. And so we're so conditioned to turn that off, to not listen, to not watch, to not engage, that if you make your way out of the church, I really believe your higher self, whatever you believe, is calling you out of that place. And one thing I've had to be very patient with, because I feel like in the way that Christianity has made us so judgmental and hard on people, deconstructors can be the same way about Christians. And I've had to learn that for some people in this life, their walk is going to be with religion. And you're not going to talk them out of it. You're not going to ration them out of it. That is their walk. That is their journey here. And for some of us, it's not. Some of us make our way out. And when we start talking, I believe the people who listen to the deconstructors, because the faithful are not. I promise you, the faithful are not clicking on those videos. The faithful are not reading those books. The faithful are not watching the shows. They're not watching the interviews. We don't let it in. But I feel like the people who have seeds of doubts are listening to us, right? They're listening to the conversations that are being had on TikTok. They're listening to us. And that is their small calling out of the religion. And I feel like until you have that, because I said to you, I didn't leave the religion because somebody convinced me that it was a cult, that somebody convinced me that the way that I was thinking about faith was wrong. Nobody was doing that to me. It was just me having a conversation with me and being honest with myself. Because another thing that Christianity will tell you is when you have doubt, when you have questions, it's the devil. It's not Christ. It's not godly like. And you're supposed to go to your pastor or go to the deacon and talk to somebody about that. And I don't know. I was just wise enough to just sit with myself and say, what is going on with me? Because somebody outside of me can't tell me what's going on with me. I have to know what's going on with me. And I feel like I was called out of the faith. And I feel like those of us who have doubts are being called out. You're not going to convince a Christian. You see devout, it's funny because I have so many devout black women that follow me that are devout Christians. And I just go, are y'all glutton for punishment or are y'all questioning? Because I don't mince how I feel about, like, and I say this, Erin, I said this too, that religion and white supremacy is hand in hand. You can't separate these things because white supremacy used religion as the bludgeon to get us to submit to white supremacy. And a lot of us as black people, that's how we wield white supremacy. We wield it through religion and we don't even understand that. And so I feel like the people who sit and listen to us, doubt is there. Doubt is there. And they're being called out too. And maybe they're just afraid to leave. They don't know what it's going to be on the other side of that. Because another thing I told you, Erin, is that leaving religion is not just leaving religion. You're leaving community behind. You're leaving community behind. And for Ashanti, who is Jehovah's Witness, you're leaving family behind. Like, and people want to stay connected to that. I feel like a lot of people are still in, whether they're Jehovah's Witness or Abby's Baptist or me Pentecostal. I feel like a lot of people are just staying in that because they don't want to lose community. They don't believe it anymore. They just want to be in community with the people they love and know.
And that's why I really wanted to have this conversation because, I'm a believer. I believe, but I'm not religious, right? And
that's how it starts.
I know you told me that. You told me that. And I feel like this is, it's like it's going around. I feel like what you're saying, you got a lot of people who are watching you, who are interested, who are questioning. After my episode with Ashanti last week, I mean, that was a lot of the commentary underneath. I even did a poll about, did you leave and never look back? Did your faith never waver? Are you thinking about it but have guilt? Are you still there? And overwhelmingly, it was like, I left and I never looked back, right? I did it in the Facebook group. I did it in my YouTube community. So I understand we are not like our grandparents when it comes to this right now.
Yeah. I think there's sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's a few things, Tammy, actually, when you were speaking, really made me think, because I think sometimes there's push or pull, or maybe a bit of both. Because for me, it was not doubt. I literally was devout, probably up until a year after I was punished for being raped. But what I think was the pull was the clarity. It wasn't the doubt. I became very clear on the organizational aspect of religion. Because what that experience taught me was that religion is a system of power, whereas I'd been taught it's all about faith, spirituality, love, and God's relationship with you. So I'm very similar some ways to Abby, because I actually studied law and I was very kind of legalistic in my mind. And I remember thinking, hold on a minute, this organization has policies and processes that they don't want to tell me. And because I'm a woman, I'll never know them. And so it was more so clarity that started to pull me away than doubt. There was a clarity about, well, if everything's based on the Bible, they should be able to tell me where in the Bible this process is. Where is this? Like, it was very much a clarity pull. But I think some of the things that also keep people in is that, obviously, that scripture about do not lean upon your own understanding.
Yes.
And so, of course, when people start to discover things, when they start to think, whether the information is presented to them or they find it, your instinct, because of conditioning and program linked to your salvation, do not lean upon your own understanding. And then, of course, you add in spiritual bypassing. So even if your life is miserable, even if you've had terrible experiences, you are in the habit and the practice of spiritually bypassing, and you're around other people who are doing the same thing. So actually, it's not easy at all, as you were saying, to leave, because everything, the gravitational pull of those things, that's what I used to call it. It was a gravitational pull that kept pulling me back in, despite the reality of what I was seeing and what I experienced.
Yeah. I saw that interview with, or the clip that Erin put up on TikTok of you talking about your rape. And I was like, oh my God, because the thing is, I was raped by a minister, and I think about this now. I was 17 years old, and I think about this now, and I was like, what was happening to me? Like, because at this point, I was really getting myself back into church, and I remember being raped on Saturday night and showing up to service on Sunday where this man was preaching. And I think back now, like I think about that now, and I go, like, what kind of conditioning has to happen to you that the man can rape you on Saturday and be in the pulpit on Sunday preaching?
Abby.
Purity culture makes us
Ashamed.
perfect targets for sexual assault and rape. And the issue that kept happening in my mind was the legal system offers us the least amount of protection available. And even within the legal system, spousal rape is not allowed. But yet, I go to church and they tell me it's perfectly fine all the time. I'm in Sunday school where these women are constantly telling me that if my husband needs it, then I should submit to his desires. And if the law outside of church offers me the least amount of protection, then why can't the church do the same? I unfortunately joined the ranks of both of you. And when I went to church for reprieve and relief, the overwhelming consensus was this was your fault. This was your fault because of a variety of things, because you haven't been chaste, because you need to concede to the demands of your partner, because you didn't pray enough, because you weren't pious enough. There were so many ways for it to be my fault. But I was able to look beyond that because no matter how much I had questioned church up until that point, it still had a hold of me. You know, ultimately, it took a threat of harm to someone else for me to feel like I'm important enough now that I can leave. And there was also, I had logic issues with church for the longest time. But surprisingly, it was dinosaurs that really logicked me over the edge. I was in a Bible study class that was called Sharing Jesus Without Fear, because this particular church allowed us to have 6-week long classes with like different topics. And I really loved that about it. I was like, well, this is an educational church. And we're sitting in class, and one of the members was sharing how she had attempted to share Jesus with somebody at her job. The first red flag that went off in my head was nobody wants to be subjected to that at work. And then the second thing was she said, because could you believe she believes that dinosaurs walk the earth and that we evolved from other beings. She doesn't believe, and I had always logicked myself into the Adam and Eve story by believing it was simply like a story, like, you know, a Greek mythology, if you will, like a way that people conceptualized the world at that time, because I did not know that people literally believed the story of Adam and Eve. So when she started, I'm just writing in my book, like writing my little notes, and she started saying that about the dinosaurs, and I looked up and was like, oh no. I said, oh my goodness, what have I done? And then I started going only to church for praise and worship and leaving. And then, well, at first it was like just going to Sunday school and praise and worship. Then it was just going to praise and worship. And then eventually I just wasn't going anymore.
Yeah, that was me. I wasn't going for Bible study. I was just going for praise and worship. When I left the church and stopped going regularly, I did go back a few times because I was missing community. I was missing praise and worship. I was missing how that communal praise made you feel. And so I did go back a few times. I never told anybody. I think the first time I talked about being raped in church was probably 5-6 years ago. I told nobody. That I was. And to Abby's point, purity culture shames you, because I was always like a very curvaceous. I was curvy from the time I was young, right? So I had TNA and this kind of sex appeal about me anyway, where people thought I was doing things that I was not doing at all. And so people had this perception of me of being this like sex pot when I wasn't doing nothing. There was no sex and no pot, none of that. And so when you have that, when the men in the church think you are something you are not, and you're raised in purity culture, and you're raised to respect authority, and you're raised to give honor to the pastor, and you're raised to give honor to the minister, whoever it is, right? And so I was thinking, I don't want to harm him. I hadn't even considered the harm to myself. It didn't even come as a part of an equation for me. I didn't want to harm him because I already knew how church operates. If you say it, you're probably not going to be believed, and they're going to believe the man of God. So why would I try to harm him and then by extension only harm myself in that?
So how do you heal from that? Like you just didn't start talking about it until 5 years ago?
Yeah, I didn't start. When the thing about trauma, a lot of us are living with a lot of unresolved trauma.
Sure.
And the brain has a beautiful way of protecting you where it'll almost be as if it didn't happen. Like you almost have to go back in the recesses of your mind to say, was this real? Did I imagine that? And I remember having a same experience when my mother died. I would have periods where I would say, did I even experience her? Was this woman ever alive? And so when you have that level of trauma, the recesses of your mind can really, it can lock you out or it can let you in. It just depends on where you are in your life and what you need to do and what you need to get through.
Yeah. I think,
Tammy, you said that you went back to church because you enjoyed like the music and having that fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
I really miss the music too. And so I got into some artists that I never listened to before. And I wrote a story about when I was raped, or not a story, but I wrote a journal entry of when it happened. And a friend of mine happened to read it, and she asked me if she could publish it, and I said absolutely not. But then I started like finding other music that I liked, and I went to my very first Beyonce concert. This is going to sound so corny, you guys. I went to my first Beyonce concert. I felt so empowered that I called her and I said, publish it. She published the journal entry that I wrote at the time that I was raped. And I felt so free. Now, the journal entry isn't completely true to who I am right now because the first half is the situation. The second half is the prayer that I prayed to help myself. Obviously, the prayer is not in me anymore, but it made to feel music again that moved me as much as praise and worship music had moved me, gave me the strength to confront this thing that had happened. And once she published it, and I posted it on my Facebook page and it was out in the open, I felt the most free that I have ever felt in my life. I was on cloud 9 for almost a year, just feeling like nobody can ever take anything away from me because I'm willing to expose the worst thing that happened, and you cannot make me feel bad about anything.
Yeah.
yeah, there is something powerful, I think, about however you get there when you do choose to talk about it. And it doesn't have to be publicly and online, but I think there is something very, um, the way I describe it is that experience in me changed me on a cellular level.
Yeah.
And when I was able to begin healing and go through recovery, it's like the cells regenerated themselves again. I literally felt like a different person after that.
Yeah.
And, this is why it is so powerful, however you choose to do it, to be able to heal. And I understand it's a privilege. Sometimes I sit and when I talk about these things, I understand that not every individual who's experienced this gets that opportunity to be able to say, I have done the healing and the recovery. I understand it's a privilege that I can talk openly about my experience and I don't have to go to bed for 3-4 nights, right? I'm okay, genuinely. Which is also why I realized that I should talk about it because I have the capacity to. And it was only when I started talking about it that I realized how many other women, ironically, have experienced it too. Because I think the part of the problem when you are religious as a woman is that because you're taught not to lean upon your own understanding, your authority is taken away from you. And so you don't always own the experience. It's very difficult for you to say, actually, this did happen to me. It was real. And it's okay that I know it was wrong. And it's okay that I don't believe I was wrong in the situation, because your authority is taken away from you. In the religion I come from, the elders decide whether you were raped or not. So the authority, my agency, is being taken again. So not only has the original perpetrator taken my agency, you go and speak to the elders and they're telling you, well, actually, we decide. We've been ordained by God to decide whether you were raped. So once again, your authority and your agency is being taken away. And I think that has a massive impact on whether you ever really go on to heal or not.
I agree. I agree. I like I said, I didn't tell anybody for years. I just put it in the back of my mind. And then I got married really young, and it did show up in my marriage probably year 5, and me and my husband had a pretty regular sex life, and then it was like something switched in my head. I remember having a memory about, I just could not, did not want to do it, felt pressure to do it, felt like I needed to do my wifely duty and do it. And it took me some time to recover from that in terms of my marriage, but I don't think I ever truly recovered. I don't think I ever truly recovered, because it felt like not just a physical rape, it felt like an emotional rape, right? Like, the thing is happening to your body, but what is happening to your spirit is almost unbearable. And you're constantly trying to regain some kind of power, right? And I think some women who are raped who then become promiscuous, I think that is about trying to get some power back,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I can control my body, I can do it. And I didn't become promiscuous, but I did become way more chaste, and that doesn't work when you're supposed to be in a marriage with a young man and you're a young woman and you're supposed to have a healthy sex life. And so I think religion really damages women in so many different ways. And I think, like Abby said, the purity culture sets women up for rape and abuse and sexual abuse, and to protect the perpetrators.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And sorry, I was just going to say, this is one of the things that I often talk about. The fact of the matter is, when you think about the way religion teaches obligation and duty sex in marriage, of course it can't acknowledge sexual assault outside of marriage because it's sanctioned in marriage. So the issue
Mm-hmm.
is not that they don't recognize it's possible that a woman might do something when she doesn't want to. They know that's true because that's what they encourage when you're a wife.
Yeah.
So that's why they can't possibly honor the experience, as it were, and acknowledge that you were harmed. Because when you get married, they're going to say that actually that's God's way. And so,
Exactly.
it gets sanctioned actually in a different context. But also, I just want to pick up on one really important point I think you said, Tammy, because when I talk about this, I never realized that I wasn't the only one. I thought I was going crazy. The injury to the soul and the injury to your identity. Because for a long time after that rape, I didn't feel like I could trust myself, my own judgment. And also, because of the nature of my job, like CEOs are asking me for my advice. And I tell you, there were years where inside I think, I don't know why you're asking me. I became an imposter in my own profession. I became an imposter in my family. I was the eldest daughter. People relied on me. And sometimes they'd ask me for directions for something. And in my head, I was thinking, well, I got myself raped, so I don't know why you're asking me for advice. You can't trust.
Wow.
It was an identity
Yeah,
injury. And
it
it
is.
took me years to get to a place where I felt like, no, you can be trusted, even at work, where people rely on me for expertise. And so
Right.
people don't realize how multifaceted that impact and that injury actually is. It's not just your body at
Mm-hmm.
all.
Yeah.
I know you were trying to say something, Abby. Did you?
I was just going to talk about the way that you lose community and when you leave the church, in terms of not just leaving the church, but because you're speaking out about sexual assault. Because, I mean, your situation is different, Ashanti, because they're not allowed to speak to you. But when I went public about being raped, one of the really disheartening refrains that I heard a lot was, but my husband does that to me too. And they were trying to work out with me
Why it wasn't.
try to give some excuse to their husband that was different than what happened to me, because they would read my story and the situation was so similar that they would come to literally be asking me, no, differentiate this for me, please.
But
And
I'm sorry, let me ask, was your experience within your marriage
it
or?
was not, it
Okay.
was with a long-term partner.
Okay.
And so people were having a lot of trouble with that. And I felt like these people didn't exclude me because I've left religion. These people have excluded me because there's no way to continue on their relationship or their marriage and still have me be anywhere in the periphery of their life.
Right, right. You're reminded what's
So,
happening to them.
exactly, because it's very clear. I didn't know it at the time, but it was very clear that I was holding up um, a mirror of the relationships that the majority of us were in.
Yeah.
And so I lost almost every single person that I was friends with from high school over
A-
this decision. But
Abby,
I
was your
was,
mom religious? Was your mom super religious too?
um, I really don't know what to say about that, because I think that my mom likes performing religion more than she actually believes it.
Yeah.
I also think that her community is only in there, and I have so much sympathy for my mom because she didn't really get to live out any of her dreams. My mom was valedictorian of her high school. She's really smart. She loves to read, but her entire life took a back seat to be wife and mom. And she did not go, I'm her youngest child. She did not go off to school until I was in middle school. And then she got her associate's degree. Um, and I really think that she struggles with having any kind of identity. I don't want to say how do I don't think she got to explore everything that she would like to explore. And so a lot of the energy that I think that she would give to other things that she loves go to church.
Hmm. Hmm.
She had actually left the church at one point because she didn't like how we were treated as her children. And then after my father passed away, she went back because she was bored.
Yeah.
Hi,
And she
church.
enjoyed the ladies that she cooked with and took trips with, and she already knew them, and they had
Rapport.
their schedules and their.
Yeah.
So I would not characterize her as like super like devout. She has no problem with the way that I live my life or my child, but I think it's more of like a routine for her.
Yeah. My mo-
Does that make sense? Yeah.
It does. My mom was super religious, and I remember when I was having, and I think about my mom a lot. I said to my sister the other day, I said we knew her as a mom, but we never knew her as a woman, because I think religion taught that generation to keep this separation, the power dynamics. Like religion, it's all about power dynamics, right? So the husband is over the wife, the preacher's over the, supposed to be have the covering for the family, all of the families in the church. The father rules over the mother, and the mother rules over the children. And so your children weren't people to, like, we weren't people to her. We were her children, and that's a separate thing. Like, there's my children are people to me. I talk to them about their life. I talk to them about their fears. I talk to, my daughter will FaceTime me while she's getting ready to get in the shower, and I'm like, put a towel around you. I don't need all of that, right? But I try to have them know me as a woman too, because I never knew my mother as a woman. And my mother, I think my mother got into religion when she got pregnant, because my mother got pregnant out of wedlock, and that was a secret we did not know until one day we was looking at her wedding picture. My mother just looked blunt, and we learned then she was looking so sad because she suffered from morning sickness, and she was pregnant in that wedding photo. And so then my mother became super duper religious. And I remember when the rape was coming up for me, my marriage, and me and my husband were not intimate, and my husband and my mom had a really great relationship. And so he called her, and he was like, I don't know what to do. And I remember my mother calling me and telling me, you have to, because she spent, I think, all of her marriage having to, right? And because he was my husband and we were married, that was my wifely duty. And I don't think my mom said that out of, because I hadn't told her either. So I don't think she said it out of like dismissing me and what was, but that was just what she was raised with. She stayed with an abusive man. My dad used to beat my mom. And I remember her going to church and praying and tarrying for God to save her husband, to save her husband, to save her husband. And that never happened. And even as she was tarrying for God to save her husband, which was to save her from the abuse, that never happened. And it never was evidence for her that maybe this thing isn't real. What that was for her was to be more devout. Maybe she is doing something wrong. Maybe, she is causing the blessing not to come. And so I remember my mom calling me and saying, well, you have to, that's your husband. You have to do that. You can't not do that with your husband. And I wonder now, if my mom had known I was raped, would that have changed anything in terms of what she would have said to me? And was she violated?
I want to go back to this whole cult conversation because Abby mentioned a cult. You mentioned it, Tammy, and Ashanti, you didn't say Jehovah's Witnesses were a cult, but that came up quite a bit. When people talk about Jehovah Witness, and I'm just curious, when you talk about it being a cult, in what way? Like, because a lot of people don't see it as that. They see it as, this is my faith. This is what I believe in. And I kind of want to talk about, Abby, you had said something about the way you see people who are in that faith still, the way you look at them now. Do you feel like they are in a cult? Is that what you feel when you see them from the outsider looking into the religion?
So that's really hard because there's no physical barriers for them to leave. I don't know what the technical definition is of a cult, but once I decided that I was leaving, or once they kicked me out, it was fine. Like, it was over. So I don't know if a cult requires that you have some physical barrier, but if it doesn't, they are absolutely in a cult of their minds.
Yeah. I was going to say the same
up
thing.
up here, they are locked up. Even though they have been so poorly treated, the pastor not that long ago who, was in charge of all these different things that happened to all of us, was having a retirement, and they asked our youth choir to come back and sing. And of course I said no, but the majority of them went and sang happily before this man who humiliated us time after time. This man has called my name from the pulpit to humiliate me because I was sitting beside a young boy who was my friend with no thought about what any of you gross old men are thinking about.
It's always projection with the men in the church.
And so the idea, that it could potentially be classified as a cult, I think is there with all the different rules they have. The rules are different for men versus women. A lot of the women are used for excessive labor. So I think, the markers are there. That's how I feel about it. It's the only way that I can conceptualize why somebody would continue to return to abuse.
Yeah, I think the word cult carries a lot of weight in general. Okay. And I think therefore a lot of people aren't necessarily going to readily associate their religion with being a cult. What I think I've observed over the years is that I think the definition and the working kind of application of cult has shifted over the years, because I think maybe if it was 20, 30 years ago, you'd think about a group of people who've gone out into the woods, they live off grid, they don't talk to anybody else, they don't interact with anybody else, that's a cult. But actually, I think there's been more modern models like the bite model that has been developed to describe some of these indicators, Abby, that do emerge in more mainstream religion, that have very similar themes, very similar behaviors. And a lot of this is also defined by consequence. So what happens if you try to leave? How easy is it to leave? If there's going to be consequence and punishment, then I think you're probably starting to move into that place where it could be considered a cult. Or the other term that probably I use, and this has taken me a long time when it comes to language, is high control religion. Because I think that term sometimes is easier for some people to use than actually
Yeah.
just outrightly saying it was a
Oh,
cult. And I believe the bite model applies to both. The idea about it is to be able to check, to look at what the indicators of an authoritarian religion actually is.
I think, like I was saying, I don't think Pentecostal people who are Pentecostal would classify themselves as a cult. Because, like Abby said, there's no physical barriers to you leaving. There's no humiliation that you have to go through. There's no repentance that has to happen in front of the church. None of that. The way that in the Pentecostal faith is either you are backslidden or you have a devotion to God. And they're always going after the backslidden. My family group chat is a literal hell for me because everybody is still deeply entrenched in religion. And it's ironic because I didn't really raise my kids with religion. And two of my children I see becoming very religious. And I know that that's the influence of my family because my ex-husband is an only child. So all of their aunts, uncles, cousins are on my side. And so they're close to all of their aunts. All of their aunts are Christians. All of their uncles are Christians. All of their cousins still go to church, right? And so I think for my children, it's a way for them to be connected to their family. That's something, a point of reference for them with their family. And I remember I was literally in the bathroom sitting saying, how? Like I didn't raise them with religion. Their father is not religious. Like how? And then I had to tell myself, that was your walk. You had a walk with religion and then you walked out. That's going to be their walk because I wanted to raise my kids to be free thinkers no matter what way they thought. And so if they choose religion, I got to let them have that. But I wouldn't say Pentecostal, the faith that I grew up in, is a cult, but I think all religion is a cult. I think all of it is a cult because it traps you here. Like Abby said, you are trapped here. Before Jim Jones got those people on that plane to Guyana, he got them here first. He had to capture their minds. And a lot of Christians, you see it. Like you see the way that sometimes Christians engage online. You're like, you really believe Noah put every animal, including roaches, on a boat and it landed and we have like the things that I sit now and I go, oh, I'm so embarrassed I believed any of this. I'm so embarrassed I actually believed that a woman was made from a man's rib. Nowhere in history, nowhere in biology has that ever happened. That I believe that. And I believe that God had to do it this way. Because I remember saying to my sister, why would a God, a loving God, create humans to enjoy the earth, to enjoy the land? Why did he need to introduce sin? Remember, this is his game. He's in charge of the game. So what was the purpose of introducing sin? And everybody screams, well, free will. But if sin doesn't exist, they can have free will without sin. What is the game about?
When you in your book are you addressing this one because that's a tough one.
What?
Yeah.
Why did he have to kill his son to redeem his own creation? Because either he's an all-knowing God or he's not. Did he not know that they were going to sin? Did he not know they were going to disobey? Because he created them. So if he knows everything, he sees everything, he knew these people were going to fail. And he could have, as a loving God, forgive them. I say to people all the time, we have a higher moral code for humans than we do God. If my child, any of my children, had cancer, and I actually had the physical, eternal, spiritual ability to heal them, do you think I would let my child suffer with cancer?
One of the things that I got in trouble for as a youth was saying that I would not want to be friends with God.
I wouldn't either. This guy is
Wow.
Yeah.
like cruel for cruel's sake.
I
If
never
I
even
would not
thought about that. That's like the fact that you asked that question, though. But go on, you guys.
like
Yeah, like
I
as a
would save my
teenager.
child. Yeah, I
As
would
a
save my
teenager, I
child.
was just like, it doesn't make sense. I said, let's say that heaven and hell actually do exist. I don't want to go hang out with that guy. He's just cruel for absolutely no reason. I wouldn't treat anybody. I wouldn't treat a dog the way that he treats humans.
Treats his creation that he loves so much.
So why would I, but then I got scolded and logicked myself out of my own mind. But yeah, as a teenager, I sat in Sunday school and I remember I was mad that day because it was cold and I had on a skirt. And
That was
we also
hyped
had to
up.
wear
That was
crinoline.
that was
Do you
hyped
remember
up in the back.
crinoline?
I
Yes.
know when you said your skirt,
Yes.
I said, was it hyped up in the back?
It was, yes. So like I was mad already. And then we were having to sing that song, um, Jesus is my best friend or best friend. I don't even remember how it goes now. And I was like, I would never want to be friends with this person. You're upset with me. And so you send a flood, you send locusts, you can't even have a conversation.
So why are black women, you guys, so attracted to the church? Ashanti, you mentioned the paternal influence, and that's why you felt drawn to it. I mean, do you think that's what it is? I'm just curious what you guys think.
Yeah, I think, look, I do believe that religion is a system of power and it is embedded in everything. If you think about the laws of most countries, there is usually a religious root in some kind of way. When you think about culture, there's lots of things that are norms in culture that come from religious beliefs. I think, religion and politics very closely linked. So it is embedded in day to day life in many ways, whether or not you identify as religious or not. And I also think that religion is a great way if you link religion to morality. And it's funny, actually, Tammy, I think you were talking about the fact that humans have a higher moral code, for example, than God. I think no, women are expected to have a higher moral code than men and God. And so when you think about morality as a control mechanism, of course, religion is one of the strongest enforcers of this morality on women. And so I think that's why it is so pervasive. It's appealing and attractive, especially if you are traumatized, if you have a hard childhood. Like, if you think about the way a lot of preaching and evangelism is done, it is usually pushing on people's wounds, right? When people lose a loved one, that's the great time to talk to them about God, for example. So, I mean, religion is one of the best sales and marketing programs you can be a part of. Hence why I think a lot of people who have been religious end up going into sales and marketing because it's very similar. So I think it's embedded in everything, and the choice to be religious isn't always conscious. It's
Right.
something you're often born into. And
Yeah.
like I say, it's closely linked to morality, keeping you safe, your sense of belonging. If you think at if you think about something like Islam, it's culture and religion. There are people, so it's deeply
Same thing with
embedded
Judaism.
in so many things. Yes, Judaism, exactly.
It's culture and religion. I think if I had to answer your question, why are black women so attracted to this religion? And I see this contrast in black Christians and white Christians. And this is my hypothesis about why I think black women specifically are so tied to this religion, especially those of us who were brought here, whether you ended up in America, the Caribbean, Latin countries, or some part of Britain, right? When you are being systematically raped, when your husband is being taken off the plantation away from you, when your children are going away from you, right? Like, you don't know if you wake up tomorrow if your child's going to be there. And this master is telling you about this God, and you're looking at what God is doing for the master. God has given the master a big home. God has given the master land. God has given the master wealth, right? And your life is constantly about survival. You have to believe in something. You have to believe in something. Like, I don't think we appreciate how brutal slavery was to black people and more specifically, Black women. How brutal it was. And so when you're in that kind of environment, you have to believe in something. You have to believe in something, right? And so if religion is what our ancestors used to get out of circumstances, even if it was working or not working, even if it was sprinkled in with a little bit of African spirituality that we pretend doesn't exist anymore because that's demonic and all that stuff, then we're tied to this thing. And that gets passed on like inheritance to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. And we know that Black women tend to be the most devout Christians. White women go to church. Black women are Christians.
Abby?
I wonder, just as a question, because I guess for me, I I wonder if there's a separation between faith, spirituality, and religion, and
Yeah.
whether that's a possibility. Because I think that some people might push back on the belief, and I think you covered both aspects, that the belief in God stems from trauma and survival as opposed to people looking out into the universe, looking at nature, looking at
Right.
creation, the process of pregnancy, although, yes, really challenging, and that's an understatement for women who are enslaved, that they would have looked and observed other things and thought there must be a God, right? I think there must be something about the human spirit
Yeah.
that recognizes there is something bigger than us. And I know for people that can mean different things, right? And so even in the midst of that, the gravity of that, they still believe that there was a God,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And somebody who was looking out for them, I suppose, right? Maybe the evidence of their existence for them
Right.
was also evidence that there was still a God, even though you're right, your master believes that you have been given to him as a favor, from God. It is very convoluted, but I also think about people pre-enslavement or that type of enslavement. They must have believed, they obviously did believe in a God, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
There's so
think,
many different African
yeah.
spiritualities and African religion. But when we got here to the Americas and the Caribbean, that was stripped away from us. And this religion was given to us by literal force.
Yeah.
And so if you're given something by force, you're stripped away from your language, you're stripped away from your practices, you're stripped away from your idea of spirituality. Now, I do believe some of the enslaved Black people, and this is why we have hoodoo to this day. This is why we still have voodoo for those who practice that, and for women who read the stars or the moons or whatever. I do think some of our ancestors held on and passed that down almost in secret because you had to be Christian. You had to be a Christian. And I just think it gets passed down as an inheritance from how we were given this religion. We weren't invited to it. Like when you go to church, I don't know, Abby, if you guys did this at your church where you have altar call at the end of every service. You have altar call and there's this rousing speech about come to, the song, come to Jesus, come to, all that other stuff. And so when you feel like the people you come from, your grandmothers, your great grandmothers, your great great grandmothers had this faith, there's a belief that something good is here.
So I think historically that is true. I think modern day Black women, whether they realize it or not, turn to religion as proof of femininity. And I think it's so easy for Black women to get characterized as masculine that some of us do things on purpose to try and avoid that label. And it may be something small, like I used to resist working out my shoulders too much so I wouldn't be too wide and boxy. And for some people, it's more extreme, which is the ritual of getting dressed for church on a Sunday
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
showing
yeah,
up in
yeah,
your
yeah.
Sunday best so that you can, even though you worked a full, 40-hour job and you're a CEO and you're, a high-powered professional, that you perform this femininity on Sunday so you can be acceptable in the community,
I think you're right.
and then
I have never heard, and I find that super fascinating, like
Yeah,
what
I
you
agree.
just said right now, because
Yes, I think the femininity piece is also connected to legitimacy, and it's also connected to purity. And I actually think it's very similar even to marriage, because those things are quite linked, right? You're trying to
Right.
legitimize yourself as a Black woman. And again, if you look at the history of Black women, especially in the West, you're not viewed as a human being and you're not legitimate as a woman. And I do agree with you that religion and marriage is a type of legitimacy. There's some credibility that you can acquire by engaging in these systems of power, religion and marriage, so that, in the hierarchy, you're not
Mm-hmm.
tilted at the bottom because you're a pure Black woman, you're a clean Black woman, you're a godly Black woman, as opposed to
Yeah,
what the
us.
world is telling you that Black women are, right? And so, and even remember that it carries some social cachet as well. If you are wanting to mate and attract a partner as a woman, if you can present as feminine, pure, and legitimate, then of course that increases, so to speak, your
Your
chances of being
value.
chosen. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I totally agree with that. And that's evident what Abby is saying. And look at the Kojic. The dresses, the pomp and circumstance that Black women do. At like these are some of the best dressed Black women you will ever see doing church. Pentecostal, right? Like my mother used to go to conventions, and my sister now goes to conventions called Pentecostal Assemblies of the World. And so we would come to the United States every year for convention, and it looked like a fashion show. I mean, Black women they were always dressed, always dainty, and probably in a way that they weren't during the week. But on Sunday, like Abby said, they could perform femininity. They get to perform that, and they get to be soft Black women, pampered Black women, taking care of Black women. So yeah, I do think it's a way for Black women, more modern day Black women, to perform femininity in a culture that tells us we're not feminine. And I think we got to pass down generations as a way of survival. And then we move that from survival to legitimacy. My great grandparents survived with this religion, and now I'm going to make myself legitimate with this religion.
I think there's so much guilt, though, when you're thinking about or considering this isn't right to me, or I don't believe in this, and that's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm observing, and that's what I think as somebody, you say, Tammy, this is how it starts, as somebody who is not religious, but believes in something, believes in God. Yeah, you're just like, for me to even form the words is just like, I don't know if I'm ready to do that, right? It's really hard, because it's really hard. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of Black women are feeling that way because we are so entrenched in this Christianity thing. And of course you're a Christian. Of course. It's like it's almost kind of what binds us together, because we've all been, Black people are just, especially in America, I would say we're similar. We know if our religions are similar. Maybe not your version of Christianity is exactly like hers, but you believe, and you come from a family and you've experienced, and we can start singing the songs, and it's really.
I liked Black American Christianity. It was far more permissive and liberating. In the Caribbean, Christianity is so strict.
Yeah.
I'm talking about so strict and repressive. So when I got to America and I saw Black Americans, I was like, yeah, yeah, I think I'm going to this church. I went to a Black American church. And somebody said, oh, Caribbean? No, thank you, ma'am. I'm in America now. Let me
Yeah.
go hang out with my cousins. No, I'm going to my cousin's church. And I liked Black American church because, outside of like certain denominations, like Abby was saying, that can be restrictive and have their own cult like feeling. But like Baptists, usually Baptists here in America, or even the Pentecostals here in America, like you could wear pants. Unheard of. You could never go to the Caribbean and show up to church in pants. When I
Yeah.
say never, never. The mothers would meet you at the door. The wraps they put around you when you fall out, the Holy Ghost. Mother's gonna wrap that around you. That's gonna be your skirt, honey.
Yeah.
That is your skirt in church. You don't come to church in skirts. You don't come with too much makeup. You don't come with too much jewelry, right? Like you have to be appropriate for church. So when I got to America and Americans was wearing pants,
Yeah.
you can get on media.
We were
Church used to
touching
be.
upon this just before we started recording about some of the stereotypes about Caribbean people. And, it is they are religious. I'm Jamaican. So sometimes when
Oh,
people are talking about Jamaican people as if we're all immoral and loose, I'm like, you don't really know any proper Jamaicans then,
no, no,
because
no, no. I think of all the Caribbean people, y'all take y'all Christianity,
yes,
y'all ratchet that up. I wouldn't want to be a Jamaican Christian to save my life.
yeah,
Child, pull the plug.
yeah, yeah,
Y'all are some of the strictest in the Caribbean with religion. And Jamaicans, I find, fall into three categories. They're either going to be Pentecostal or holiness, right? Like fire, brimstone, Holy Ghost, blah, 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 blah. They're going to be Jehovah's Witness or Seventh-day Adventists.
yeah, yeah. Those tend to be the three, or nothing at all,
Or
right? But
nothing
even
at
if you're
all. Or
nothing
going to
at
be a
all,
Rastaman. Yeah.
yes, even if you're nothing at all, you do believe in God.
You do believe in God.
We believe in
Ashanti,
God.
what would you say? Abby says she considers herself an atheist. I'm like,
Mm,
I still sit with agnostic in that
okay.
I don't believe in this Christian God we were given. I think that was a way to keep us oppressed. And, the more that we believe in the God and pray to this God, these folks that did the things to us ain't gonna never see judgment because
Mm.
we're covering them. But that's a whole nother show for a whole nother time. So I would call myself more agnostic. I believe something is here, but I wouldn't call it the Christian God. I like when I think about God, the Christian God does not pop into mind for me.
Yeah,
Where would you place yourself?
I do still believe in a God, but before I had a very clear image of God, and I'm not talking about like physically, but I
Yeah,
had
yeah,
this
yeah.
clear image of God that I identified with and I connected with. That isn't the case anymore, but I do still believe there is a God, and I'm not religious. I wouldn't describe myself as religious at all.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll give you more description of like how I orient myself.
Okay.
So I believe in a God of the gaps. Have you ever heard that before?
No.
I have.
So so it kind of goes like this. Once upon a time, thought that the sun revolved around the earth. And if you tried to make a mathematical equation that would give you the positioning of the sun at any given time, it wouldn't make sense because the sun does not revolve around the earth. And so there was a mathematician who wrote in the margins of a book where he was trying to do the mathematical formula that this is where God comes in because this formula, I can't work it out, A mathematician comes behind him, and at this point we recognize that the earth actually moves around the sun. And so now this mathematician can solve the problem that the earlier mathematician could not. And he crosses it out. There's no God here because now I figured out this equation.
mm,
So I think that God only exists in
In the
the
gap.
knowledge that we haven't figured out yet. And as soon
interesting.
as we can figure out the science and math behind it, then that gap is filled. Now, when my dad passed away, what I looked for was an emotional relief because math ain't everything. I looked to different cultures. How do you express your grief? Because I'm grieving. And the only way I know how to express that doesn't make sense to me. How do I call upon God in the situation that I don't believe in?
Yeah.
So the emotional element of that, I haven't completely figured out. I did try some things from different cultures. I still want relief a lot of days, but I know that is me searching for something that's beyond science and
Yeah.
beyond math
Yeah.
that still doesn't need to be a supposed omnipotent, omnipresent being who actually doesn't solve for anything.
I could
I
just
love
read the
that.
comments now, Abby. I know
No,
what they're gonna say.
yeah, it's gonna be wild in them comments, Abby.
Can I just say something? One thing I will say that I find really ironic about people who are Christian is that there's lots of things that they don't know that the Bible doesn't answer, but they supply answers for. And when somebody like Abby speaks and shares her thoughts on what she thinks about whether there is a God, suddenly you're automatically judged as wrong and blasphemous. And I find that ironic, because if you look at Christians in particular, they make things up all the time that haven't actually been proven, right? They supply things in the gap that you quite clearly describe, and they supply explanations and beliefs that are harmful. So for me, when I hear you speak, I don't feel offense. I don't think it's wild at all, because I'm like, I came from a religion where they literally decide what's true, where there isn't any evidence from the Bible. Does that make sense? And the things that they decide impact real people's lives. So to me, I think it's okay for us to start, think what you want, if I'm honest, because religion gets to decide. They decide things all the time.
Yeah. Speaking of they impact people's lives, my neighbor is Jehovah's Witness. And this was the first time I heard this. And her husband had cheated on her. And they went to the ministers, because most religion always will favor the man. like I think once we understand that religion really is for men, than it is for women. And I wish women would wake up to that fact. And so apparently there's a rule in Jehovah's Witness that if you forgive and he enters the bed again, that you can't ever leave him.
Right. So
and so she forgave him, got back in the bed, and then he cheated again. And I remember her, there was a bunch of elders that came to her house, and she said that they ruled that she cannot remarry.
Okay. So the rule, this is what I mean about rules. So obviously what they do is they take that scripture that says you become one flesh when you marry. And for them within Jehovah's Witnesses, that one flesh is marked by sex. That's the one flesh coming together. So if one of the marriage mates has sex with somebody else, and even what the definition of sex is very hazy, especially when it comes to men. If it's a woman, it's very clear. When it's a man, it's very hazy. If he has sex with somebody else, then you as a woman, if you have sex with your husband again, that is deemed to be forgiveness. It's the sex after knowing about the cheating that is the forgiveness. Now, as you can imagine, in practice, that gets very tricky, because sometimes people are emotional. They may not have made a decision about whether they want to stay. And if they're husband and wife, they might well have sex again. But that means that you cannot divorce him after that. You lose your right for divorce in that religion. And then if the person repeatedly cheats, of course, you have to supply evidence to the elders that cheating has happened, and they have to approve that divorce. So if your evidence isn't good enough, you will not be granted that divorce by those elders. You only have 6 months to decide. So if your husband cheats and you find out he cheats, you've got 6 months to decide whether or not you will divorce him. And in that 6 months, if you have sex with him, it's null and void. You have to remain in the marriage.
Yeah.
Is this in your guys' Bible?
Wow. Like I said, it's the rules. It cannot be evidenced by scripture.
Yeah. Because she said she can't remarry. She is bound to him.
Right. So the way they see it is if there's no grounds for divorce, which the only grounds is adultery. So if they feel that she's reconnected with him, the one flesh, then she loses her grounds for divorce. So even if she wants to divorce after that, it would be deemed to be an unscriptural divorce, which means she's not free to remarry.
And she's young. She was in her 30s.
Yeah.
2 small daughters. And I was like, so you have to live the rest of your life
Yes.
without a companion.
Yes.
For the rest of your life.
And within the Jehovah's Witness faith, there are more women, than men anyway. And so what tends to happen is if your husband cheats, you are discouraged anyway from leaving him. And it literally says in the publications, you need to think about who will take care of your financial needs, who will take care of your sexual needs, because it's known that the women do not remarry at the same rates as the men do. You can have one brother who goes, and he can marry 2-3 times, right? But if as a woman, particularly if you're over a certain age, etc., they know the likelihood of you remarrying is very low. And that also means that women are disincentivized, of course, from leaving a cheating husband.
That's wild. Okay. Last question. What do you guys want Black women in particular to know who are questioning, who are on the fence, who are struggling in this area of their lives? We can just let's start with Tammy.
Top right corner, huh?
Your top
So,
left for me.
so what I want Black women to know who are questioning or having doubts, or as Ashanti said, have clarity, is that your walk away from religion is not going to be the same as everybody else's walk. And you may have times where you do go back, because I've gone back. You may have times where you feel like you can't let go of certain aspects. I remember, like for me, gospel music is so deeply entrenched in my religion, in my faith, choir, all that other stuff. Until I started listening to what I was singing over myself. And I said, oh, I got to stop singing this stuff. This is disempowering. I'm always kneeling. I'm always begging. I'm always searching. Like, it's so disempowering to who you are. So you may like the beat, right? You may like the little jig that happens that we do when we're in church. But no Black woman, particularly no Black woman's walk is going to be the same. And if you have times in that journey of leaving where you go back to give yourself grace, empathy, and compassion, because a lot of us don't have a straight walk out. I think social media can make it seem like, especially if you're watching a lot of deconstructing videos, that it was a straight walk out of religion and you never turn back. That's not true for a lot of us. And some of us go back, even if it's just music. You may not go back to the building, but you playing that gospel music and you feel very connected to that gospel music and you feel very comforted by that gospel music, even as the words are disempowering to you, you still feel connected to it. So if you have doubt, if you have clarity, your walk doesn't have to look like every other Black woman's walk or every deconstructing TikTok you see or anybody that you're dealing with. Your walk is going to be your own. And to honor the way that we're taught to honor our relationship with God, honor the relationship with yourself as you leave.
All right, Ashanti.
Yeah, my main and genuine thought is that you have the authority to decide what you believe. You have the authority to decide what you believe, whatever it is, whatever way it falls, the authority belongs to you. I think, secondly, your dignity matters. There's a lot of things that happen within religion that strips women of their dignity, and that matters. And if you've experienced that, you can absolutely trust your lived reality. It does matter, and you get to weigh up your religion or faith against whether or not you are being dignified.
All right, Abby.
I would say there is a community waiting for you. You may feel like you're leaving everything behind. You may, in fact, be leaving all your friends behind. You may have a time of loneliness, but there is a community that's waiting for you virtually and in person, and you will eventually find that community. I had said earlier, I lost all of my friends from high school pretty much when I left, and I turned to making friends online in Black atheist and agnostic communities, and then eventually I found some in real life as well. So whatever it is that you are interested in, just continue pursuing your other interest, and you'll meet people in those positions, and it won't feel so lonely anymore, just for a time.
Yeah. If I could add as well, I think it's also a very vulnerable time. You
Yeah.
are actually very vulnerable emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. And one thing I've learned and shared with others who've asked me, do not rush into new friendships, don't rush into new relationships because you are vulnerable. And sometimes when you may be leaving something, you are pulled to other things and you may not realize why. It doesn't mean that everybody is safe. Even if it seems that we both agree that we've had a hard time in religion, whatever it might be, it doesn't mean that all of these people are safe. So you do need
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
some discernment because it's still a very vulnerable time.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people will read that as me saying that the devil's going to attack you. That's not. I'm just saying energetically and emotionally, sometimes we are vulnerable when we are leaving a entrenched, embedded way of life.
Yeah.
And so you can misjudge and misassess
Yeah.
people on the basis that they're saying, I don't believe in God either. They could really be the devil. And I don't mean the devil you've been taught, I mean as people. And it may not be safe for you to be
Yeah.
forming these close bonds with just anybody. So I would say, I think some discernment is needed. And there's almost like one of the things I read when I eventually started reading material is that it can take about 10 years for you to
Yeah.
really recover from leaving religion. And so if you're in those early years, you can be vulnerable.
Yeah, I agree. Don't rush into another thing because you left one thing. Trying to fill the gap or the void. Because, like Ashanti said, that void may be the absolute void. I'm talking about complete darkness there. So don't feel like you have to replace religion with something else. And I think a lot of people replace religion with spirituality. And that's such a broad umbrella, right? Like people are practicing all kinds of different spirituality. And I think you have to get to know who you are outside of this religion to understand what fits for you. And sometimes none of it fits. None of it fits. It's like Abby. When the gaps get filled, the gaps get filled. But I don't have to fill it with something. That's what a mutual of mine on TikTok says. She says, I don't believe in God, but I no longer feel the need. She says, I'm an atheist. She says, and I no longer feel the need to fill in the gaps. She goes, for a long time, I felt the need that I needed to fill in the gaps. And she goes, I don't feel the need to do that because I didn't do that when I was religious.
Yes, and that's important because I think some people, from my observation, they start displaying quite extreme behaviors, and they think that that's really who they are, but actually it's because you're in that dip when you just leave. So they get tattoos, they get loads of piercings, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with those things. What I'm saying is they're not always necessarily decisions that you would make once things have leveled out and you become more sober minded about
Yeah.
your identity in relation to faith and spirituality and religion.
Mhm.
And so you do have to be careful about, not mistaking certain behaviors as this is who I always was, because actually you might not want to have sex outside of marriage now, right? You might not want to. Just because you think you can now, it doesn't mean that that's truly who you are. And again, sometimes I
Mhm.
think people in that gap make some big important decisions that aren't really
Mhm.
reflective of who they are, but they were, I don't know what the word is, almost like when you've gone cold turkey and then I think you just have to be aware of that.
I would equate it to it's a grieving process, I
Yeah.
think, for sure. And we've all lost someone important. And like when I lost my mom, I dated poorly, right? So to your point, Ashanti, that's important, I think. Just being in search of anything, you know what I'm saying? Just trying to fill the void.
Yeah.
Very important. I think this is a great conversation. I feel I don't know what's going to happen in the comments. I don't know what people are going to say because I got some interesting ones when Ashanti and I had our talk. A lot of people felt the need to. One person in particular, it's like they just come in with all caps preaching. It's like, did you hear what she said, or are you just here to preach in all caps? What are you doing? You
They're
know?
just there to preach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I think similar to what Abby was saying before we started recording, to the woman you spoke about who is in religious psychosis and doesn't listen, I think that a lot of times when it comes to conversations about religion with certain women, I think particularly Black women too, there is just no open-mindedness sometimes. We just like the girl that you said, she doesn't listen. She just wants to tell you what they know or what they
Yeah.
believe or what they've been raised to believe or whatever without any willingness to think about it a different way or consider it a different way. So I just want to thank you all for coming on, and it's a hard topic, and I might ask you back because like I don't know What we
This is the most I've talked about religion because I told you I kind of shy away from it. It's
Yeah.
like the final frontier for
Me
me.
too. I shy away from it. I'm not where you are, but I shy away from it for the reasons that I said. It's
Mm.
because if that's what you've known and then you don't have that anymore, then what are you? Like what that's hard to reconcile that in your mind. It's a big decision. So and I know just based on just sitting up here on this microphone and listening to women and interacting with other black women, I know God didn't put me, God, whomever, universe, didn't make me the only one out here to have thoughts and be the
Mm.
only one to experience these things by myself. So, um, the
Can I
conversation.
say one last thing? I think walking away from religion has made me so empathetic to Christians because I know that mindset. I lived it. I lived it. So when they get into the comment section and they're throwing scriptures at me, I understand that. When they
Mm.
get in the comment and they say things like, "Well, I don't care what y'all talking about. Everybody on this new," I because I was that person.
Mm.
I absolutely was that person, and knowing how on the other side of it, how indoctrinated I was. When they
Mm.
come into my comment section and they spew that, I just read those comments and I remember that girl because that was me.
Mm.
That was me. Not like I wasn't always like I wouldn't comment in people's comment section. I don't do that. Like you can search my username. I don't leave ugly comments on people's posts. If the content is not for me, I just scroll. I don't feel a need to do that. But when they do get in my comment section, I that was me.
Mm.
And even if I didn't say it, I believed it.
Yeah.
Even if I never said it to you, I believed that if you didn't come to know Christ and, all knees are going to bow and every tongue is going to confess that Jesus Christ is like, I believed it. And I know when they come into my comment section, just like I thought I was doing it from the good intention and a pure place, and I wanted people to be saved and I didn't want people to go to hell. A lot of them are doing that for that reason.
Yeah. And a lot of the time it has nothing to do with you. They are
It has nothing to
defending
do with me.
they're
Absolutely
defending their
nothing to do
own
with me.
identity. They're
Yeah,
defending their own identity and they're defending
exactly.
something so intrinsic. Because I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
this is one of the things that for them, their nervous system cannot even cope with fathoming that it's possible that what they believe is wrong, because then that links to their salvation. Right. And so
Correct.
this is a nervous system deep thing where their body does not feel safe. They will die. I
Mhm.
believe that
Mhm.
Armageddon was coming. So it was real. It's death
Mhm.
that is coming
Mhm.
to you
Mhm.
if you do not believe this. And so when I see people like that in the comments, I understand that you
Yeah,
have to defend your identity.
you
You
have
are
to.
trying to stay alive. But equally, what they're doing is what they've been taught to do,
Yes.
is
Yes.
deny, deny, deny. And we see this across many areas of life.
Yeah.
When people talk about sexual assault, people don't believe you. That
Yeah.
I literally, you will get people in the comments saying, "Well, that's not everybody. There are lots of kind men. Not my husband. Not my." That is, it's deny, 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 and so
Yeah.
that's what you are witnessing when you see people put those kind of things in the comment.
Yeah. And I
If
just
we
want
get
to
to,
go ahead, Abby.
if we get together again, we can talk about what Ashanti just said. I have a lot of religious anxiety or anxiety that came from religion
Yeah.
as a kid, and it's affected me in so many ways. Like as a kid, I was constantly trying to figure out when I wasn't a kid anymore because we learned that all children go to heaven. And so I needed to know when I stopped being a kid and started being accountable for my thoughts. And it
Was
gave
it
me a
12?
lot of anxiety.
Were you taught 12?
It was not defined. And so I was constantly searching myself for any definitive. I would ask different people, I would search through the Bible. I was constantly looking for when am I responsible? Because I needed to repent for every single bad thought that I had
Yeah.
and quickly
Yeah.
because you don't know the time or the hour. And that
Yeah.
has given me a lot of anxiety.
We were taught that we were no longer children when Jesus, I think he was 13, um, when he came back. So 13. So we were told that when Jesus turned 13, he was now the Messiah, the Savior, all the things. So that's when we become accountable for our sins. So growing up in church, I was told it was 13. But yeah, it has, there's so much anxiety and stress around religion. So that's why I said walking away has given me so much empathy for people who are still in it. And I know sometimes like deconstructing people or those of us that the faith can be very nasty and cruel in the way that they talk about Christians. And I just go, where is your, like, how do you miss that empathy piece? Because you were them. You were them. You
Yeah.
know exactly what's
Well, this
driving
is
that
the thing,
conversation.
Tammy. One thing I've learned is that not everybody is actually devout, even though you're all sitting in the same
Yes.
room. Do you see
Yes.
where I'm coming from? Because
Yeah, yeah,
some
yeah.
people are there because it's tradition and it's culture, and some people are there because they think it means their life.
Yeah.
And so there's been so many people I've met who will say to me, "Oh, I never believed it anyway," and I'm like, "I actually did.
Yeah.
I actually wept and
Those
sobbed in
usually
my
aren't the people in your comment section dropping
Yeah.
scripture. Those,
right."
them
And
devout
so
ones drop
what
scripture.
we assume that everybody's level of emotional and nervous system attachment is the same. It is
It
not,
isn't.
because
It is
I
not.
actually wept and sobbed. When I had to go through that judicial, I felt it was. I can't even describe the pain, the heartbreak. I could not. There are still no words, because I thought this must be God's wrath. Whereas for other people, it might not affect them that way. There are a lot of
Yeah,
people that
yeah.
will just leave the religion, right?
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes the truth is, we don't know people's internal consciousness
Conversations. Yeah.
around it, even though we might all be in the same room on a
Yeah, yeah.
Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah. I think all of us here were devout. I I think all of us here were very, very devout. I mean, I went to church Tuesday night prayer meeting, Thursday night Bible study, Saturday night choir rehearsal, Sunday morning service, Sunday evening service. And I did that for years.
I never went that much. I
I'm
did not.
I'm so sorry. I have to leave and go
I
get a delivery. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Um um that's it. We can wrap it up.
Okay.
Thank you
Abby,
guys.
how do people find you? How do people find you?
I'm on TikTok, Abby the Attorney, Instagram too. I'm much happier on Instagram.
Are
Oh,
If you want
you?
to, yes, Instagram is a much happier place for me. It's a photo place, it's a travel place. On TikTok, I'm just telling horrible stories.
Wow. Okay. Well, I think I follow you on Instagram, but I've been
All right,
more.
I gotta check out Abby on Instagram since she
Yeah.
said that
Yeah.
she likes that better. I'll
Well, I'm
check
going
you
to
out.
put all of you guys' information into the description, and I'm gonna.
Pleasure meeting you tonight, Abby.
Yeah.
You too. You guys too. Okay.
Thanks,
I'm
Abby.
sorry.
So at this point, Abby the attorney has left us. However, even when I try to wrap up, the conversation just keeps going. And it actually gets super funny and way off track. But just stick around to listen and get a giggle. And not a giggle as well, but the conversation does take a turn. We're probably gonna have to come back and
yeah.
I have no idea what the comments are gonna say. So we'll see how
But
it
you know
goes.
what, Erin? It's good when there is
Oh yeah.
polarity in the comments. It's good.
Oh, for sure. I'm very I'm excited. I was excited to meet with everyone. This has been a very interesting conversation and questions prepared that I didn't, I'm just observing because I'm trying to be as neutral as possible. Because I know I'm going to end up, when I find the right ones, I'm going to have the other side. You know what
Yes.
I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
as neutral as
That was
possible.
interesting to me, and obviously because this is like the stuff that's a big part of my work is about self authority. I actually don't think there are sides. As long as if you are exercising self authority, you can believe what you want to believe. That's the way I genuinely see it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, as long as you know, as you're as conscious as you can be about the decisions you're making, the same way I have the self authority to think religion isn't for me, you have the self authority to decide it
Think
is for
religion
you.
is for you.
I
Right.
genuinely don't see it
But
as
that's the other
for
side, what I
them.
mean. Like, I
Yeah,
mean, women who feel like religion has been good for them, who
yeah,
maybe have struggled and come back. This
Yeah.
is those women I'm interested in hearing
yeah.
from as well, because they're very convicted in what they believe as well.
Oh
So,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
10 years ago, I would have been that woman on the other side of this conversation.
See, that's what I'm
You know,
saying. Yeah.
I do think I'm with Ashanti that people get to decide if religion works for them. And I believe religion, like, I inherently believe some people's walk through this life is to be with religion attached to them.
Yeah.
I just
Some
believe
people
that.
need it. Some
Some
people
people
need it.
need religion.
Yeah.
I have family members that need religion. They need the rigidity. They
Yeah.
need the structure. They need an authority outside of themselves to tell them how to live their lives and govern their lives, because without it, they would be a menace. So some
Yes.
people need religion, and I accept that. That's why I said, when I see Christians get in my comment section sometimes, and it's so ironic to me that I have so many Black women who are Christians that follow me,
Yeah.
right? And I think because I don't speak down to them. Like, if I'm talking about the link between religion and white supremacy, I'm just having an academic conversation here. I'm not making it personal to anybody.
Yeah.
I'm just having an academic conversation.
I think
Yeah.
the way both of you guys speak is just so compelling. All of you, really. Abby's not here right now, but it just pulls you in, and that's why I'm drawn to each of you. Like, oh, this woman is really talking about something. She's really
Yeah.
talking about something.
I think also the reality is a lot of women live in cognitive dissonance anyway. I know I keep saying
Yes,
that. When you
yes.
look across life in general, the way you're treated as a woman by men, you're living in cognitive dissonance all the time, because what you see and experience usually is not aligned with what you've been promised. So if you can do that in life, you can do that in a religion. I actually think a lot of women know that something isn't quite right all the time, but they're willing to stay. They can rationalize it and they think, here's the trade-offs. I'll stay. I genuinely think a lot of women know that.
Now, Erin, please keep this in. Please
Okay.
keep this in.
Oh, Lord.
A lot of people are Christians and they're there because of fear. A lot of people are being held into Christianity on fear of hell. Fear of hell, fear of damnation into a burning hell. That's what keeps a lot of Christians, because one of the arguments you always get from Christian is, but what if you're wrong?
Yeah.
Right? So they'll take the risk. They'll take the risk of believing this faith, like Ashanti was saying, performing the faith, because they don't want to be wrong. It's that, what if you're wrong? And that's what Christians always say to me when we have these conversations. But what if you're wrong? And I said, if I'm wrong, I'm happy to go to this place called hell, because the God of the Bible is not a God I would want to spend the rest of my life worshiping anyway.
I definitely believe a lot of Christianity is performative, for sure.
And the thing is, you can still believe in a God and not do all the performance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is what I say. Like, it's so funny, Tammy, when you're talking about what if you're wrong. I literally had to get to a point. I thought, I'm going to take I'm going to take my chances.
Yeah.
Because as far as I'm concerned, I know my character, and I also know I still don't live the life the religion taught me was wrong. So really and truly, I'm basically in the same spot in many ways in terms of my morality, as they would regard it. I'm still not doing the things I wasn't allowed to do before. I don't desire to do them now. So I got to a point where I'll take my chances, because even if God does come back, he's going to find me not really doing the things that I was always told you shouldn't be doing anyway.
Exactly.
So I'd rather lose my dignity. That
You
part
got
I'd
divorced
like.
so you can be around. I said, I got divorced. I've only been with one person since like, I don't like, first of all, I don't like trading energies with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't find people that compelling. When I say people, I mean men.
Exactly.
Compelling enough that I want to trade energy and bodily fluids with them.
Exactly. And you know what's so funny to me is that churches will defend and protect people whose morality is in the gutter. So I must feel bad? No, I don't think so, because you've got people there who are abusing children. You've got people there who cheat on their wives constantly. You've got people there who like to sleep with underage girls. I can't be convinced that the life I'm living falls below the line of acceptable when in the church. You are harboring these kinds of people. So again, I'll take my chances, actually, on the outside. I just will.
Well, with that,
We're taking our chances. Ashanti and
Yes.
Tammy are taking their chances.
Yeah.
Well, Unpunishable Woman and delusional influencer Tammy Triolo, you guys have been awesome, awesome. I can't wait for your book to come out, Tammy.
Yes.
It's coming, and then we'll have to have you back for that.
Okay. In the meantime, you can get that one.
The
Yeah.
empathy
Yeah.
gap. And I'm
Yeah.
going to do my empathy. I haven't had a chance to do my empathy scorecard.
I was gonna ask you, did you do your?
I didn't. I didn't, but I'm gonna try to work on it this weekend. I was traveling, and then I was catch up.
Well, no. I want you to be in a place. I want you to really sit down to be able to do it.
I heard you say that. I heard you say that when you said somebody. I think it was on one of your videos. Somebody thought they were gonna do it real quick, and it's not that. So I knew that I needed to dedicate some time to really.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't wait to do it.
I can't wait until you do it. I will say, as we end here, I want to say to Ashanti, she said something, and I was nodding my head vigorously. I don't know if y'all noticed that. But when she was saying when she experienced the rape, she didn't trust herself. Even in her workplace,
Yeah.
even in her expertise, even what she knew, she didn't trust herself. And I think I was nodding because I was like, I had periods of not trusting myself in my own work, right? And I was like, well, why don't you trust yourself? And when she was saying like a lot of people don't have the capacity to really heal from trauma,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm just unearthing the trauma of my mother passing. And I haven't really even reached back in the recesses of my mind about that rape.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think it's another reason why I'm not promiscuous, because when that happens, you don't trust that you're gonna be in a safe situation with this man.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
why it always stuns me when women go on first date and they come back and they say, "Oh, I'm like, first of all, what man are you meeting so interesting that you want to take them to bed?"
I just had this conversation with a friend of mine because we were talking about girls who are promiscuous because somebody had and I don't know if I'll keep this in, you guys. Somebody had done a video about what happens, what is going through your mind when you get a train run on you. What is going through your mind? And it was a stitch. And then the girl came in and she said, well, I'll tell you what happened to me because I had this happen to me. And, she said she was intimate with her man, and then all of a sudden she looked up and his friends were in there. And she didn't know how to respond, so she let it happen. And so my male friend was like, well, she must have liked it. I was like, absolutely the fuck not.
Yeah.
Okay? I said, you don't know what
don't know.
happened to her. Why something happened to her for her to feel that way. Well, she must be. It's like you don't understand how many women have been harmed and sexually assaulted. So she might not love herself enough. She might have been, thinking this
No,
was
Erin, I'm sorry. A lot of this isn't that complicated.
okay.
Because a lot of it is, the fact of the matter is, this stuff is wrong. Men will find any excuse
Yeah.
to say that a woman wanted it and desired it. Meanwhile, you never asked her. She's never expressed that interest to you before, for starters.
Right.
The other thing is, a lot of these young girls, I'm sorry to say, it is impossible that a young girl has the sexual taste and preference for that kind of sexual.
That's what I was trying to communicate, because I said at that young age, there's no way that this has happened to her and she wanted that. Absolutely not.
And
Absolutely
also,
not.
And I saw that video, and because obviously I talk a lot about sex on my, that stuff makes me angry because it is not a sexual taste or preference for most women, period, and not young girls. And so men need to tell themselves and each other these lies, because at the end of the day, it's the same thing when men will think that their wife is enjoying the sex and she is not. Like, you can never, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, you cannot trust men's assessment of women's sexual satisfaction.
I went so hard on him though, Ashanti. I know he turned it around by the time we finished with that conversation.
It's not a sexual.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Great pun.
And what about the guys who were in there? Like, I'm sorry, So
it's absurd when I hear these things, because also as a woman, I can honestly say I don't have any female friends that can text or call me and say, do you know what, Ashanti, we're in a room and there's one person here, come along. That doesn't happen between women. There is no WhatsApp group for that. And that's why I do not hold back when I talk about men, because how is it you even have friends who thought of calling you, who thought to text? What kind of person are you that your friend thinks you would even be interested in coming to a room where there's one woman, she's barely speaking, and all of you are doing what? That to me says a lot about who you are and who your friends think you are. Because amongst women, there's no woman that's going to text or call me and say, Ashanti, we're at a hotel in room 314, and I go. Let's just get that straight. One, I actually go, and two, when I get there, there's someone there. Hello, no. And so when they try to remix these things after, I do not allow it, because it is straight barbaric, egregious on every single level that you even participated in such a thing in my view.
He just was like, you don't think so? I said, I know not. Not at that age. Are you crazy? Any age. Nobody asked for that. That isn't pleasurable for her.
Thank you.
That's that woman's profession, and she's getting paid to do that, and she's consented to that. No regular woman is, enjoying sex and then look up and see her friend's buddy. And what kind of man? That's what I'm saying. This is why I never, Erin, I don't know if you was with me when I was doing some of my dating content.
I don't know. No. I've seen a lot of that.
So I was doing dating content, and by dating, doing content, just like, every now and again I'd go on a date. And I would have girlfriends who was also dating, and they would, go back to the guy's house. And I'm like, I have sat across from quite a few men in very nice restaurants, eating very nice meals. The ambiance was beautiful because I expect no less. Okay. And never once have I looked across the table and go, we must do it tonight.
Right. Right.
Never, not once. In fact, I don't even kiss men on first dates. So I'm like, who are these men you are meeting that you find so interesting, so sexy, so compelling that you can't go home by yourself? You must go to this man's house and you must take him to bed. And the answer was always the same. A lot of these girls, maybe don't keep this in, Erin.
Now, at this point, Tammy Triolo has asked me to not keep something in, and the conversation gets really juicy a little bit after darkish, and perhaps at a later date I will air it. I will have to get approval from Tammy and Ashanti, but we had a great conversation, and I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. We are going to continue this conversation on religion. This is the first time we've talked about this in a panel, but it certainly won't be the last. And we will address this topic from all sides. And I will do my best to get the right panel together to facilitate these conversations. So I just want you guys to know that. Thank you guys so much for sticking in there with me to listen, and we will see you in the next episode.